guys, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new to the channel and you like what you see, please hit that subscribe button and feel free to leave a comment and let me know what you guys think about the videos that we're putting out. Now today we're going to be doing the oil change on a 2015 Audi Q3. Check it out, guys. We went over to ECS Tuning and we picked up their oil change kit. It's about $62, the one that we got, which was supposed to be their premium oil setup for this car. Let's take a look here. We got ourselves some liquid moly 5W40, a nice Fram oil filter, a crush washer, and they threw in one of these, well, I guess you're paying for it, magnetic oil drain plugs. So all this came out to about $62, I believe, for the kit. I'm sure you can get it a little cheaper if you don't want to do the magnetic oil plug. Alright guys, so the first thing we're going to have to do is remove this undercover of the Q3. It has, let's see, 3 T20 Torx screws on the front. It's got about 8 flat or Phillips head screws around the perimeter, and then there's these 3 giant T45 screws a little closer to the back that you have to remove. They're pretty giant, and the dealership who did the oil change last put them in with a ton of force, so I had to really crank on them to get them loose. Alright, if you can see that, that's the T45 screw or bolt. Guys, I don't know if you can see this. I'm trying to get a light so you can kind of see. So here's the oil pan here, and here's the nut, the oil nut at the bottom. It's also a T45. Yeah, it's also a T45, so make sure you have one of those. The ECS one that we got with the magnetic drain plug, that is actually, I believe it's metric. It's actually a nut that screws in, so it will replace this one that we have here. So let me get my oil drain pan. Alright guys, so we finished draining the oil and everything. We cleaned up. That's the biggest thing I would probably tell everyone. When you're working on your car, make sure you clean the area that you're working on. This way later down the road, when you take stuff back off, you can see where there's leaks, if anything's leaking, you know, if anything's going wrong. It's easier to diagnose when the area is clean. So we cleaned off the oil pan. We reinstalled the oil plug, the magnetic one we got from ECS, with the crush washer. Remember to always replace the crush washer when you're doing the oil changes so you don't have any of those like little leaks. And we're gonna leave the bottom tray off right now until we finish the oil oil change on the car, run it for a little bit, and see if anything's leaking, make sure everything's good under there before we button everything back off. Because the last thing you want to do is do all that work, start working on the car, and then you start seeing an oil leak. And then you have to take everything back off to figure out where it's coming from. So just a tip, leave the bottom tray off for now, wait till you finish everything, double check everything's tight, let the car warm up a little bit, you know. I would cycle the ignition on and off a couple of times before you start it. You know, sometimes that allows the oil to pump a little through the motor. And then once you start the car, let it idle for a little bit and check and make sure there's no leaks coming from the oil plug. Make sure everything's tight. It also gives you a chance to inspect the underneath of the car and make sure nothing else is leaking or out of place. Now the next thing we have to do is to replace the oil filter. On the Audi Q3, unlike the A4 on my B7, the oil filter is underneath the car on the right side, and that car uses a cartridge style oil filter, which is there's a solid, not a solid, but a permanent fixture that you have to unscrew and you replace the inside of it, and that would be the filter, the cartridge style. While this is actually an oil filter that comes out all together as a whole. I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but you kind of understand what I'm saying. So the first thing we gotta do, we took the cap off. Next, we're gonna pull the cover off the engine. And now it'll give us a little bit better access to the motor. We have this hose running across the front. This looks like maybe a fuel line. It looks like, I'm not 100% sure, but I think this is a fuel line. And what we'll have to do is kind of move it out of place. It's actually a soft line. Yeah, that's got to be fuel. And you're gonna take it out of these little clips that it's in. That'll give us a little more access to the oil filter here. And these things are normally supposed to be just hand tight. So let's clean it off a little, see if we can get some leverage on it. Not getting much leverage on it. Whew. All right, guys, so I just pulled this out of my box of extra parts for the B7 to kind of explain the difference between a cartridge style oil filter and then just a regular replacement oil filter. So the cartridge style, this you don't throw away like in a normal one, like this man filter, which is the entire oil filter itself, which you just replace the entire thing. On the B7s and some of the other Audi models, well, a lot of the Audi models, and I believe also a lot of German cars use the replacement cartridge style, where this part is removed off the motor or off the oil sump or whichever, whatever you call it, and then there's a cartridge that fits in here, and then you screw this back into the motor. So I feel like that's maybe like less waste because you're just replacing the actual filtering cartridge inside of the oil filter instead of, you know, getting rid of this piece of metal plus, you know, the whatever filter that's inside of it. So I don't know. I mean, I guess this might have been cheaper. That's why they went back to this type of style. Or it could be, you know, a lot of people had problems because the stock oil filter style housing was plastic, and it's easy for, you know, these guys are rushing doing your oil changes to cross thread them, and then once they start leaking, it's a pain to get it to not leak without replacing a whole bunch of parts. And I ended up having to do that on my B7. I ended up replacing the whole the oil filter housing plus the oil filter, and I ended up putting back on the plastic stock one because it came with it. So I figured, let me see how that works, and it hasn't leaked yet. But I'm a lot careful when I'm taking off and putting on the oil filter. So let's get back to replacing the oil filter in this car, which has been a pain because it does not want to turn by hand. I had to try everything I could I actually put one of those rubber wrenches on it to go around it just to get it to turn a little bit, and then I'll take the rest off by hand. But you know, now it was hard to say the least. Now let's see. Now when putting this back on, when you put the new one back on, remember to oil the seal around the top part of it. Let's see if I can get so long. Careful. There's the old one. Put that there for a second. Throw this in the oil can. And I suggest getting a cloth and going in here and just cleaning everything up just to make sure everything's good. There's no marring around the edges. Yeah, it looks good. Now, this is the new one. And you have a rubber around the edge here. So if you can just take a little bit of oil. You can take some new oil or some of the leftover oil and just run it around the rubber so that it doesn't, it's pretty much to help it seal properly once you put the new one in. You know, it doesn't bind when you're screwing it in and then, you know, leave a kink in the rubber, which is a pain. And then you'll get a leak right there. So be very careful. Don't cross thread it. It should go in relatively easy. And you don't want to tighten this too tight. It really should be just hand tight, you know. I mean, I got a lot of oil on it, so it's a little slippery. But once you got it down there and it's pretty snug, you should be all right. Again, like I said before you go and put the cover on and all that stuff, make sure the level's up to where it needs to be. Start the car, let it idle for a little bit, and then check all these connections. Make sure there's no drips or leaks, and you don't have to go back to it. Alright guys, so now, okay guys, now it's time to add some oil, or add the oil back to the motor. The cool thing about these liquid moly bottles is that you literally pull these two tabs up and then pull this out, and it actually gives you kind of like a funnel built into the bottle, which is really cool if you don't have one. And it helps you not to spill once you are adding the oil to the motor. Now, for your car, make sure you check the specs on how much oil your car takes. This car, I believe it's 4 and some. What I like to do is put, you know, once I get close to what the recommended specs are, I like to start checking the level. And once you get to where it needs to be, then you can, you know, button everything up and you know, start the car, let it get through the system. Then I like to let it sit for a little while, then check the level again, because once it goes through your system, it might go down and you need to add a little more again. It also gives you the chance, once you let it run for a little bit, turn it off to check for the leaks, and by the time you do all that and everything looks good, you can button everything up, and at the very end check again once the level kind of sets where it's going to be. You can see if you need to add a little more or if it's good where it's at. Alright, so let's get to adding some oil to this. I know we already tightened the oil drain plug at the bottom. The oil filter is in, so now it's the time to add the oil. Alright, pull the cord out. Let's see if I don't make a mess. Alright guys, so we filled it up to the full mark. You really don't want to overfill these motors. Try your best. It's better for it to be a little bit under, and you slowly add until you get to that full mark. Also, you want to let the car idle for a little bit, let it run for, once you get to that mark, let it run for a little while so that the motor can circulate the oil, and then let it cool down. And then once the motor cools down, check the oil level again, because sometimes, you know, once it runs through the engine, the level might go down a little bit on the dipstick, and you can add a little more, so you're exactly where you need to be on the motor, and it's and you're up to spec. Guys, so we already filled up the oil in the car. We ran it for a little bit. As you can see, our magnetic ECS oil plug is in, and there's no oil leaking after we ran it for a little while. So now we know under here is good. We wiped everything off, make sure everything's clean. Now we can put the under tray back on and take the car off the ramp. Alright guys, and here's the finished product. And, you know, I just took a rag and just cleaned off the motor. You should always clean up your engine bay as much as you can. This way it'll make it easier for you guys to see any issues, anything leaking. And it also makes it look a little more presentable. I like a clean motor. This is not a full detail of the motor, so it's just a quick wipe down just to make it look, get all the dust out of here and blow it out with an air compressor. But pretty much that's all it takes to do the oil change on one of these cars. I'm still gonna let it sit for a while, let it cool down, and then I'll check the oil level again and see if I need to add a little or if it's good where it's at. Alright guys, so now we did the oil change. We're gonna reset the light in the Audi Q3 so that we don't keep getting the reminder that you need to change your oil. First thing you're gonna do is press the start button, but don't put your foot on the brake. We just want it on the on position. Next, you're gonna go to the menu, or I think also you could click on car. Yeah, there you go. So you click on car on the left hand side, and it's going to bring up this menu here, and it's going to tell you when your next oil change is. This one says in 12 days. So what you're going to do is you're going to scroll down to reset oil change interval, click on it, and then it's going to ask you if you're sure about that, and you're going to click yes, and then it's going to say the oil change interval has been reset. So at this point, what you want to do is shut the engine, shut the ignition off, and then we're going to press our foot on the brake, start the car, and we shouldn't get an oil change message. I'm getting the inspection light message. We did the inspection already, but to reset that, they're saying you need a VAGCOM or something else to connect to the computer to change that. I'm gonna try to look into what else I can do to get that reset, but now our next oil change is in 10,000 miles or 365 days. And now we know that it's been reset and we're good to go. And then we can get back to our regular menu display. Alright guys, so I think that wraps up our oil change video. Let me know what you think. Did I miss anything? Could you think of anything else I could do to make it faster or better? If you liked the video, click the like button, and if you're new to the channel, like I said in the beginning, please subscribe. And I think that's gonna wrap it up for today. Until the next video guys, take it easy and keep wrenching.